Hello, welcome to the Live Reality Games podcast. I'm here with Naomi today to talk about Survivor Maryland, Major Conflict. Naomi, how are you doing?
I'm thrilled. I'm great. And I'm ready to take the crown. I don't know. I'm here. I'm ready for it.
Well, this is exciting because today we have the winner, the one and only, the Santi from Survivor Major Conflict. Santi, how are you doing?
Doing great. Steve, Naomi, thank you so much for having me on. Excited to talk to you guys.
I mean,
we're psyched. We're psyched. Sorry, Steven. What were you going to say?
Thrilled. Same.
Yeah. I mean, it was fun getting to go on the live reaction show with Anders and the crew, but now we're just talking about my game. You know, I'm a type 3 Enneagram, so the more it revolves around what I got going on, I love that stuff. Bring it on.
Oh, you did I also just did my Enneagram recently. I took a screenshot of it.
Oh, it's like a personality type thing where it I don't know if maybe like you've heard of Myers-Briggs. That's another popular one. So it's similar, but you've got like 9 different personality types, and I kid you not, it helps me understand people so much now. I can't like not try to learn somebody's Enneagram type now, because it's just it reveals so much. I'm like, I understand you, I understand myself. It's great. Highly recommend.
Yeah, well, I took a screenshot. I'm also a 3, so I hope that lets you in on some sort of secret about me.
Yeah, we can bond over that. That's good. I could just shower Naomi with compliments. She'll love that stuff.
Oh, Steven, what were you saying?
Oh, well, I'm glad you're giving the secrets to helping be a good podcast host with Naomi now. That's how I stay on her good side. This is important.
Yeah, yes. I'll give you all the tips, Steven. I'll give you all the tips.
So awesome. I'd like to start off with the genesis of your game in Survivor Maryland. What got you into Survivor Maryland? Was it because you were a Survivor fan? Was it because of Doug? How did you end up applying for the show?
Yeah, so I had never watched an episode of Survivor before I applied. I'd heard of the show vaguely, but it was this thing where a few people on my floor, including Doug and Tim, were applying, and they brought it up. They were talking about it. I have severe FOMO, and it sounded really interesting, so I checked it out. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I didn't know, it was just this thing I applied for. I didn't know how competitive the process was to get in. And then I was like, oh, all 3 of us got in. I guess it's not that competitive. But no, it was great. And I loved, there were pros and cons to playing with people that as kind of the whole show demonstrates a little bit of that. But that's kind of how I got into it.
Mm-hmm. So that surprised me because Doug is such a massive Survivor fan. I was thinking Santi must also be a massive Survivor fan.
No, I'd only watched before I played. I watched one season of Survivor Maryland, Guts and Glory. I watched Katie's season, and that was all Survivor I had ever watched before playing. Now I watch a little bit more Survivor. I've seen a few seasons, and I love the show, but I'm still not a massive fan to the level Doug is. I was going off much more just instinct and kind of how I got by up until then, just survival instincts, I guess.
So Doug applies, you apply, you both find out your cast. Heck, even Tim is cast. Do you think okay, I hope I start in the same tribe with Doug. There's no way they're gonna put us ever together. What's going through your head?
I think I didn't like that I was alone at first. I wasn't thinking oh, I really want to be on the same tribe as them, whatever. But I didn't like when they were in the tribe together and I was off on my own, because obviously it's such an advantage to start the game with somebody that you already have a relationship with. But looking back on it, it was probably the best thing for my game, because that helped me learn on my feet and not rely. Doug came in with so much knowledge, so it would have been so easy to just pick his brain and try to get an understanding of how he saw the game early on. But being on a separate tribe, obviously we talked and stuff, but being on a separate tribe, forming my own relationships, completely detached from Doug, helped me to okay, I understand what this game's about on my own and learn how to play it the way I wanted to play it before then coming on a tribe with Doug. So yeah, I think I originally wanted to be on a tribe with either of them. Because there was like this weird thing when we all started playing and I wasn't on tribe with them, we didn't trust each other. Like, cause it was just this, like, you're on another tribe, like, we're competing against each other. There was this weird thing of like, I don't know if we should talk. It just felt a little like we were feeling it out. But in the long run, it worked out.
Did you and Doug kind of talk pregame, like, hey, what are we gonna do? Or did Doug like give you like tips or advice or strategy going into it? Or you just kind of said good luck, have fun, and let you?
No, we didn't talk about it at all. I just, yeah, I remember was watching Survivor Maryland and going in, all right, like, let's see what happens. But really, we didn't talk game until it started.
Mm-hmm. Because what's interesting is, I think Naomi and I had discussed a lot, like, our Santi and our Doug work with each other because we're not seeing it, but they're roommates. I don't think it's till like episode 4, like right before the swap, we really start seeing these strategies with you and Doug in your rooms with each other. Like,
yeah. I mean, we talked a lot more than definitely was shown early on. I think that was a little bit of the edit, but I think the feeling was we were trying to, because there was this early on, there was a much more cold separation between game and friendship. Mm-hmm. And it just felt more like, oh, we're both playing this game, haha, like, this is fun. The idea of backstabbing one another was just very like there. And so I think both of us were trying to get a gauge of like, all right, how are you playing this game? How are you playing this game? And I think trust really did need to like get built up over time, as far as like, oh, okay, this is how you play. And then it wasn't this like we came in, trusted each other, because really, like, there was information that Doug didn't tell me, that I didn't tell Doug until later on. So that part doesn't get shown. But we were like, it would have been stupid not to talk early on and get a read, because it's an obvious connection you have to the other side. As much information you can get about the other tribes as you can is super, super useful. But it was this like trial period of like, all right, let's feel it out. Let's see where we're at.
Also, I just want to say Delaram says hi, and hi, Delaram.
What up, Delaram? Still working on your golf swing, Delaram? Still practicing every day? All the tips?
Hopefully working on throwing bolos too.
Yeah. Right. Much needed.
Is that something you had put kind of thought into, like, pre-season? It's like, oh, like, I'm playing with Tim, I'm playing with Doug. These are two guys I'm really good friends with. Was it like, did you ever think like, would I vote them out? Could things come to it, or?
So Austin pointed this out during the reaction show. During the interview, they asked me, would you betray somebody for, would you betray one of your friends for the win? And I was so like, oh, that's just like, this is before I'd seen a single episode of Survivor in my life. I was like, no, that just sounds mean. Like, why would I do that? And I think as I learned more about how the game was played, I was like, oh, I could totally see myself like backstabbing somebody that I knew in the game, because it's just a game. That's how I like approached it early on. But it was just like one of those, I think I came in with this, I approached a lot of things like this where I'm an overthinker by nature, and I know that about myself. So I try to come in and just like, all right, clean slate. Like, I have some ideas of what I want to do, but I really like to go feel out the environment, feel the vibe, see what types of people are casted, kind of try to read them a little bit. See like, okay, we got some Delarams over here, we got some Erics over here, and like Mike's and like who do I vibe with? Okay, here are the people I want to work with. Now you start forming a little bit more of the strategy of like, here's how I want to go about it. But I would say it was definitely on my mind, like, oh yeah, I could vote them out.
If you had to play another season, would you be much more willing to do that?
Yeah. I mean, okay, so first of all, we did 2 seasons online during quarantine. One of those was the fundraiser season, Generations at Core, and then one of them wasn't actually recorded. And on that one, it's not going to release a sweat. Like, I got dug out pretty early, and it's just like,
you got your revenge. I like it.
It's still funny. It's still funny because I don't, he got so mad because it's like, it wasn't good for your game, and I don't know. You could argue it either way. I didn't end up winning the season, so there's always the argument like, oh, you shouldn't have done that. But it felt so good. It felt so good to do it, and just to be able to say, yeah, I placed better than you.
Well, I think it's such an interesting, like, the I kept thinking about the games that I've played where either I've been voted out at that spot where you're like, you're so close and yet so far. And I always find my instinct is that's what somebody else has to do to win the game. And if it's me, I understand that I'm the threat right now and take some pride in it. And it was really interesting to watch you guys sort of wrestle with like the friendship of it, and especially watch Doug sort of wrestle with the like, but I really want to win and take it all in. But I think you kind of having this attitude of like, well, I want to play a game is interesting considering where the season goes. And we talked about it a lot, sort of Steven and I just together, but like, it's not necessarily your fault that the season ends this way. There is a lot going on that you are sort of forced into to make a season end in such a strange manner, but it's not like you were always never going to vote out Doug, you know?
Yeah. There's so many things that kind of had to happen for it to work out the way it did, right? And I would say, I think Anders does a really good job of articulating the really good. It's a strange ending to the season for sure. It's a kind of a dark ending to the season.
That's what I've been saying. I was like,
right?
I told Naomi, she's like, I'm gonna rewatch. I'm like, I don't think I can. That was hard to sit through once. I don't want to sit through it a second time.
Yeah, I mean, there's like some real emotion and all that stuff, but I think there's some really interesting takeaways from the season that maybe you don't get in a typical Survivor season. And I get all the frustration online. Somebody that's starting to get a lot more of how Survivor is typically played and understood. I completely understand the frustration of like this purely analytical, strategic game. So I totally understand it from that standpoint. But I'm just somebody that I really now a lot more passionate about the strategic and reality game show element on one hand, but on the other hand, there's just this very raw human element that sometimes comes out in these reality TV shows that's so just as interesting to me as like the strategy side of it. And so I think there's a element to the season that has that because of the friendship, because of the raw emotion, that while frustrating maybe on the strategic element is still so interesting to watch from like a behavioral standpoint, from just understanding how people make decisions about friendship in a game that's complicated and difficult to play. And so there's some really, really interesting things that I think came out of the season and why it makes it really compelling. But yeah, no, and when you play it again with similar people, then it's like it's not like a new game. People always, I've played with a few people and they're like, oh no worries, like what happened last season, blah blah blah, blank slate. Absolutely not. Never believe those people, right? Because the last season's in your memory, so you're put in a similar situation. You're thinking like, what did this person do last time? It's at least part of your consideration.
Yeah, and also I think in live reality games in general, or I think both in Survivor and LRGs, there are examples. I think the first thing I thought of was when Holly got voted out in Survivor Maryland All-Stars, is this heartbreaking Final Four vote. The Final Four, and in earlier Survivor, the Final Three, is always that vote where like somebody is either making a decision based on their heart, someone like Wu, or they're making a decision based on, I want $1 million fucking dollars. And so it's always a heartbreaker. And I think this is no different. I just think everybody's upset because Doug was so strategic that he seemed like the obvious vote. But Doug also utilized a lot of his emotional capital with you guys to pull this off. But that's not always the way to win. It's not always the way to. The heartbreaker has to have a certain amount of like, I don't know, grace to it. I don't know. But I agree. This is a fascinating emotional study. And there's some people who are like saying that Tim should drop out of Maryland and go to clown college, which I thought was a lot. And that's the stuff where it's like, it's a fucking game. Guys, let's chill the hell out, please.
Yeah, I felt bad about the reaction against Tim. Tim's genuinely such a great guy, and I get it. I think a lot of people seem to understand a lot more from my perspective living with Doug. They like saw like, oh, you're roommates, that's why you can make an emotional decision. But Tim and Doug were also really close. It wasn't just like, oh, we were in the same freshman dorm. Like, we're also really, really good friends. So it wasn't this huge separation of like, oh, Santi and Doug are roommates. So it's like, that's one thing, that's one category. Like everybody else should be, not even consider friendship. But when we went into the game, I mean, Tim and Doug, especially the first half of it, were seeing each other way more and spending more time together than I was spending with Doug, even though we were roommates. And so much of their friendship took off because of the game. So I think it was equally hard on Tim, and we had a lot of conversations when the Final Four did happen about like, all right, here's where Doug is at. What do you think we should do? And we really wanted to make that decision together, because if one of us makes it and the other one doesn't, it could really backfire. So there was a lot of thinking through that as well. So I get the frustrations. In some ways, I was talking to some of the cast members recently, and I was like, honestly, I don't like a lot of what's said on the online comments, but when I get a little frustrated by it, I think about the money that was raised during the generations at Core to such great causes by the same Survivor Maryland community. I'm like, I don't like where their mouths are at sometimes, but their money's in the right place, so I'm gonna get over it. And so that, from that aspect, I love the community. I love what it can accomplish. So, but yeah, I felt for Tim because he's somebody I care about as well.
Yeah, well, it's the Survivor fans it's even like, correct me if I'm wrong, that's just like Survivor fans as a whole, right? They think they can do anything.
It's people on the internet. It's people on the internet, right? It's that separation from the people. It's let you say things you'd never say in person.
Absolutely, and I'd love to meet these people in person. I just want to see like can you say it's somebody's face? Like, that's the more, and people that message me on Instagram were like super nice. And so people, like, anytime your image is associated with it, it tends to be much more kind. So yeah, but I just wonder if there's like 12-year-old kids, typing this stuff up. Like, I just don't know who is it.
Everyone has that reach the 12-year-old population impresses me. Well, something Naomi said was interesting. It's like you felt like you were in a hard place this season where you're playing with your best friend, but you're in a situation where you can't vote out your best friend because you're worried about the ramifications. And it seemed like the best solution is you yourself needed to be really, really blindsided by a Doug vote out. You needed everyone else to vote out Doug without your knowledge of it, and then you could pick up the pieces and run to the end.
That would have been so ideal. And it happened in generations at Core. I wasn't even dealing with Doug. He got voted out on his own. I was like, oh, great, fantastic. That takes care of that. But it's when it's like on my hands, then I feel this like moral dilemma, right? Of like, oh my God, and hear the emotions, and hear all these things that like in the abstract shouldn't play a factor. So yeah, in an ideal world, Tim just go like that second recording doesn't happen. We don't have to deal with all that mess, right? But I also don't know that I would have won, number one, had that happened. So there's an element of like, that might have been tough. Not to say I couldn't have done it.
Well, but you would have had an idol at that point, because Doug has given you idols in your pocket.
Right. But I think I would have had to win the Final Four challenge.
Maybe.
I don't think there's anybody that brings me to the end.
Persuade Tim to take you.
Tim might, probably not. Tim wanted me gone. Tim was ready to vote me out that round. Yeah. And Angie was not taking me to the end, and so I really don't see a way that I get to the end without winning the Final Four challenge. So anyway, that's one element. But two, and this is just purely selfish and from a personal growth standpoint, I'm really grateful in a way for like how dark it got in my friendship with Doug, because it was kind of like this forge of like, we really went through something really difficult in our friendship. It's like, oh, we made it through that. We both have grown a ton as people, partly as a result of like everything that got brought out from that experience. So it's like, such a valuable thing that some really, really important lessons that I learned through that whole friendship dilemma debacle at the end of the season. And so I look back, I'm like, I wouldn't want to change it. But if we're talking Survivor and like avoiding all that mess, yeah, then just go through with your plan, take out Doug, I'm mad, and then we move on, and then the rest of the game plays out.
What if the season had been the final two, and it's you, Tim, and Doug, and you win immunity? Like, is that ever something like that sort of not nightmarish what if scenario? Like, what?
Gosh,
are you and Tim just dropping, and Doug is winning immunity and taking one of you? Like, have you ever thought of what happens in that situation?
I legitimately have no idea what happens in that situation. I think it's this whole re-examination, right? It's like, because it's a different scenario when you have an option to take out somebody else.
Mhm.
and then you take out your friend. But it's like, all right, it's only friends available. Like, now what? So I think it might have played out very differently in that scenario, but then it would have been like this weird, we're like, oh, but we just made it about friendship and now we're cool with it. Now it's okay. Like, it just would have felt really weird. So glad that we did not get forced to do that.
I mean,
Well,
have you seen season? Sorry, Neil, I keep cutting you off. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, actually, Stephen, go first because I'm going to take us on another direction.
Well, it would have been like, have you seen season 3 with Feluki and Victoria and that challenge? They were holding on to the sculpture for several hours.
I know about it. Yeah, I know about it.
I think we could have seen a repeat of something like that where Doug might have been talking you all down, but who knows?
There's I think Survivor can really bring out dark sides of people, and I think that's what Doug was wrestling with, and I think he saw like certain things about himself that are like part of his personality, part of what he's willing to do come out. And I don't think he was comfortable with that side of him. And that's Doug is, to me, super interesting to watch this season because obviously so talented in manipulating people and doing all these things. But Doug genuinely is a very, very, very great person. That's such a good, loyal friend outside of the game. And so it was just like this very complicated duality of like he's genuinely both and can be both, but which is going to come out in different situations. So yeah, it would have been really interesting to see how he went about that, because I think that's really what it came down to, is Doug really not being able to process that situation and it really conflicting in his emotional space of like, I don't know how I'm going to feel if this happens, because I'm discovering parts of myself and even having these emotional reactions that I've never felt before. And so it's just like uncharted territory for him and our friendship. So that's why you see this like, all right, so now what do we do? Like, this is totally unexpected and frustrating, but we also really care about each other's friends beyond this game. So yeah, it's messy. It's messy. Emotions are messy, but in short, I'm really glad we did not have to deal with another emotional episode with that stuff.
That finale would have been like 12 hours long.
Oh my gosh. Just therapy sessions. A therapy session from Anders would have been read instead of confessionals.
I would like to revisit later in our discussion, like kind of the healing that takes place maybe after season between you and Doug. But for now, Naomi, take it away. Bring us in a new direction.
I was going to talk about, speaking of friendships and friendships that kind of get a little, I don't want to say messy because it was not as messy, but like you and Angie, I thought was a great example of another friendship where it's similar to like, hey, we should have gotten Doug taken out independently so we didn't have to vote them out ourselves. Angie gets taken out and you don't have to really do anything except for go to rocks. I mean, and risk going home yourself. But I really loved your relationship with Angie because you always sort of kept her safe. Could you tell us a little bit more about like your early bonding with her and why you guys had such a strong connection that took it all the way to the final 6?
Yeah, I love Angie. So Angie was one immediately day one when you're kind of doing your little scouting. Like, all right, who do I want to work with? Angie immediately was like one of the top of my list. And then Angie paid for, like, she had this coupon for like Nando's and got me chicken and like paid for, I was like, geez, you know, like, dude, we went to, she had a free like discount, and I don't even know, like I think it was like literally free. It's 4 years ago. But, you know, we went on that and it was just like, all right, we've bonded. This is great. And so, yeah, it was such a good dynamic early on. You brought Josh in. I really, really trusted her. I thought it was just like a very great, like easy person to work with. What we found as it went on, and I think that was one of the interesting things watching the season back, is that I had this like enormous amount of trust in Angie and consider her number one for most of the season, above Doug, above anybody else. But I was never that for Angie. And I think there's a few different reasons for that. But among them is that I had a lot of options of who I had this alliance with Jasmine, Mike, Liam. I had obviously Doug and Tim. And I think she saw that and she was like, oh, I can't trust his words. I can't trust what he's saying because he could easily backstab me. And Angie has this inherent like I think most people have it in Survivor, like this paranoia of like, are they actually meaning what they say or they don't? So the trust wasn't fully there, but we still really like. I think we genuinely liked each other as people. And then after the swap, a little bit of the story gets lost in the edit, but basically, the vote when Jasmine goes home is Angie went dark on me. Like she wasn't texting back. She like the day of the vote, like I had not heard from Angie, and I was like freaking out. I was like, this means they're coming for me. And so that's what drove me to like hit up Tim and Amanda. I was like, let's talk. I think they're turning on me. We need to make I'm down to work with you guys. And then Angie texted me like an hour before the vote, like, oh yeah, don't worry, we're still going Dane. And I was just like, what was that, Angie? Like, I have no idea. We had this huge blow up where literally it was like a couple fighting in the lobby of one of the dorms where I was just like, I can't trust you anymore. How could you betray me in the game like that? And it was like, oh my gosh, like
why do I have to work with Dane now? What the
right? So yeah, but and then we reconcile later. So I had really and there were some really vulnerable moments where I was like feeling it, just like with how hard the game was. Like I think later, not even before all the stuff with Doug happens, but just there was just something that was like messing with me about I don't feel right about this, and I would share very openly with Angie about that stuff. So we built a really great friendship through the game, and that was a lot of fun. But obviously it was unfortunate the way it ended.
There's a real string of emotional votes there. It's you lose Jasmine, and that like sets everything off. And then Liam's pissed, and Mike's pissed, and then Liam and Mike go, and everyone's just sort of like I think losing their minds at like how the red tribe has just dissolved so quickly. It really is just like a tornado of like I love those guys just they like crack me up, just how upset Liam is, how upset Mike is, and then it's like, and we're rid of them. Goodbye. Like, we don't want to deal with you anymore.
Yeah, well, those were that string of votes is what really shaped the merge, because those were all really strong strategic players that would have really tried to make moves. But it was also, I think really helped me and Doug take over the game from then on out. We put ourselves in a very comfortable position with those string of votes. So probably from an entertainment standpoint, I think it was Morgan, Liam, Jasmine, right? Going backwards. Yeah. But that really, really made it difficult for other people to figure out how to get me and Doug out.
Yeah, we can't blame you for everything. Like, they didn't talk to Josh, and like that's still the most sort of egregious move of the whole game. Is basically going, should we talk to Josh? Nah, and then you guys swoop right in. Like, what? Oh, so funny. This I know people sort of I don't want to. They say like they kind of diss this season, but like that sort of combination of like the hubris of so many people's actions, and it always comes to bite them. Is so funny if you watch the season back.
Yeah.
Before we get away from the swap, so
yeah,
let's say you don't have Tim on your tribe. Let's say you have Sadie. Like, let's say you don't have Tim or Doug. Do you think you would have been as quick to make that quick to realize like, oh, I think they're voting for me. Let me jump to the other side, or would that have changed your options if you didn't have Tim there?
That's a good question. So I don't know if I would have been as quick. I think I would have reached out still. It just would have been different from the start, because what freaked Angie out early on is that I threw Morgan's name out as one of the options that I'd be fine to go with. And I was legitimately saying, here's who I'm okay with going, Amanda or Morgan, you pick. But Angie hears Morgan. She's like, oh my gosh, she's going for Morgan. And I had no idea that like jam was a thing, that they were super close. So that's, I think, what sent alarm bells ringing to Angie and triggered this whole like chain where Jasmine's going off and talking about stuff, because it could have been a really simple Amanda vote. I think had Tim not been there, Amanda would have been a much easier vote though, because then Amanda is like just somebody I've never worked with, that I don't really like have any intention of working with, but I obviously wanted to work with Tim. And so I was like, okay, maybe that's not necessarily the direction I want to go. I at least had to think about it. So had Tim not been there, I think that might have been a much more likely scenario. But let's say Angie still goes dark. I had talked to Sadie before and probably would have wanted to work with her. So I think I would have tried to make something happen. It just wouldn't. I would probably would have felt a little bit more unsure because there wasn't this already trust built from outside of the game.
Well,
Right.
when you were watching the episodes back up to this point, you start, at least as a viewer, we start hearing people throw your name out as like, oh, we need to get Josh out. Well, what if we instead attack Santi instead? Why don't we get him out as a blindside? We even see Jam kind of discussing, well, we'll take out, let's say, Dane first, and then do we maybe swing on Santi second? I mean, I don't know how was that the first time you're hearing back the episodes, or had those rumors kind of floated your way in the game?
They had not floated my way. I had a hunch. It was a game hunch, but it wasn't like people were telling me like, "Oh my gosh, your name's being thrown out there. Be careful." I think it just happens. When I watched it back, I was like in such a great position in the Red Tribe, and after that, what's that challenge called? I was the lion, whatever the Animal
Kingdom one.
Kingdom one. Yeah, that's when it was like, oh my gosh, yeah, like Santi like has power, but also have a leadership role in that. And I tried, so my threat level in the game was really high, and so it was just easy to throw that name out as like somebody you want to get out early because they're well connected, somebody that can win challenges, whatever. And so I had a hunch that people would want me out, and the swap came at a perfect time, that I didn't really have to deal with it and then shake things up. But no, nobody, Angie certainly didn't tell me like, hey, like Morgan and Jasmine are thinking about it. So I just knew that it was likely that people would want that to happen.
And had like Doug kind of told you that like you've seen him and Tim together, so Doug and Tim are working close together. Do you know that Doug is working with Amanda? That he has kind of Dane in his pocket? Do you know that like hey, there's this alliance with Doug that I can probably find shelter at? Do you realize that as well?
You know what's really interesting? I underestimated Doug for like the first half of the season, big time. I had no idea, because when you're in a different tribe, I'm not in these conversations. I don't know how many conversations Doug is having with people. He would tell me like, oh yeah, I'm working with this person, but it's like you get a limited view. You don't know, like you can't see the dynamics play out, so you can't get a feel or like, wow, they really trust Doug, or wow, they're giving him a lot of information relative to other people. So it was just like what I heard through Doug, and I just was pretty confident in I have like these really great relationships. It has to be better than what Doug is doing over there. But Doug really was like, wow, like that scrambling out of especially I think one of the things that caused me to underestimate Doug is like, oh, he almost got voted out that episode when Chris went home. And I was like, bro, what you doing over there, like getting your name thrown out this early, like like what's going on? So I was pretty blind to how well Doug was playing on the other side, and I underestimated that a little bit.
Is there anybody from this early game, even I would say pre-merge, that you wish you could have worked with more? Maybe that is Jasmine, but like somebody like even Liam, or maybe Big Evan, what's Gucci? Like anyone you thought you might have wanted to work with more in retrospect?
Ivy was somebody that I liked from day one a lot. Had no intention of voting her out. She just got herself in a lot of trouble. And she was a good player. And she's somebody I was like, oh yeah, she'll be good to work with. It was just like every time you talk to Ivy, it felt like an appointment. I'm like, all right, I got 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Like, sorry, Liam's coming in, so it's time to go. And so it's like, all right.
Like, thank you so much. He's gonna sneak in now. Thank you. Oh.
Yeah. And it was like, wow, she's so cocky, and she's talking to everybody. It's just there's like this art to social interaction. Some people are like very like there's an art and a science, right? And some people are like very on the science side. And when you don't have like the art of like the charisma, the little like just like knowing how to make people feel special, like they made me feel good. Like people undervalue that sometimes, don't realize how important it is that they had a good vibe from the conversation. And I think Ivy, at least when we were talking strategy, she focused so much on the strategy and not on the like vibe of the conversation that the alliances weren't formed. But I wanted to work with Ivy, and Mike. I would have worked with. He just got voted out by the other tribe. Mike and I were very close.
Yeah, shout out to Mike, who will always DM me "Go Bills" on Twitter, which makes me laugh every time. Go Bills, guys!
He's a happy man right now. They're
Go to the
on
Super
good luck
Boys.
against the Chiefs. We'll see. They got a big hurdle still.
We're absolutely boned. I've never cared about football before in my life, so it's only because the Bills might win, which has never happened.
Love it.
I know.
Love it. Hey, Stephon Diggs grew up like 10 minutes from where I lived in Maryland.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, he's man.
Sports. He's a Terp too. He's a Terp.
Oh, that's right. I think I saw that. And I was like, oh, hey, them. Which is very funny. I think now when I look at college sports, I only associate it with College Survivor.
Survivor Michigan. I wonder if they were friends with.
Yeah, I wonder if they knew Ben. Yeah, exactly.
Live reality and collegiate athletes are like always friends in college. Always happens that way.
Steven, what do you want to talk about?
There's one question we promised we'd ask every person we interviewed. What do you think of Teresa? Did you ever have a chance to meet or interact with her?
Who, Teresa?
Yes, from Other Tribe.
Yeah, everybody loved. People are like, love Teresa, right? That was one of the perceptions early on. I like Teresa. You know, it's funny. I didn't have that much interactions with her in the game, but I was kind of confused as to why she got voted out early on because I thought she would go really well. After talking to people, they were like, "Oh, basically, she just was terrible to schedule with." It's so funny how like small things can just, if you don't do the small things, you get yourself voted out of Survivor. But then I played against her in soccer. Oh my gosh, she embarrassed me. Like she nutted me twice. I was like, thank God she got voted out early. I don't know if she's doing that to me on a soccer field. I don't want to see her in Survivor later on. But yeah, she's cool. She's cool people.
I would have loved like an in-game. Everybody just decides to play soccer and like becomes an alliance, and then we just watch Teresa kick everyone's ass.
I'm actually surprised we don't see College Survivor actually have like just you're playing soccer or have some sort of sporting challenge more often. I think I've seen Ultimate Frisbee in one though.
I would love it. I was all about the physical challenges. Those are my favorite for sure. But I also think Teresa. What I remember people telling me is that she talked a big game during Steal the Bacon and didn't back it up. That's always the thing. If you talk a lot of smack, you got to back it up. And then she ended up losing. So it's just little things like that give off. You can be a big personality. You can talk a lot as long as you live up to the hype you're selling for yourself. So I think that was probably her issue too.
It's funny. I think that's an issue that actually is cursing Tim a lot in this season. And it's not, like Tim. To be fair, Tim won challenges. Tim was always sort of in the boat, in the know. And then he just gets to the end and he's like, I kicked ass. And everyone's like, no, you didn't. And he just has to sit there and be like, but I did. What did I do? And like, it's so hard to watch, but it's funny. I think Tim has a little bit of a similar arc, even though he did manage to outlast Teresa by quite a while.
It's so funny because Tim, like in person, not like the last word you used to describe him is cocky. Like he's not a cocky person. But yeah, it's just funny. I think Tim says it because he wants to he puts it out there and he wants to motivate himself to be manifest that and to manifest that. So it's not this like, oh yeah, I'm this, but like it's like let me put it out there and then I'll work really hard to make that come true. So that's at least that's how I read Tim, but I think some people read it as like, oh my gosh, he's so delusional about.
Confessional is like, I'm going to win this season. You're like, oh, that's a really dangerous confessional to have. I don't know if I'd ever feel comfortable saying that on camera.
Right. I think he's just again this like, if I believe it and I say it, I believe it hard enough, there's a chance.
And attitude is huge. Like having your head in that right space.
Yeah, I wonder if it's worse to like say I'm gonna win the season and then not win, but make it to the end, or say I'm not getting voted out and then getting voted out. I don't know which one is worse, like in the sort of hubris of it all. But I and that's the other thing I love is that getting to speak to everybody after the season is knowing that Tim's not like a cocky jerk by any means. He just is being on camera and he's playing it up for the camera a little bit, and it's nice to hear that because I think a lot of people think that whatever's happening in whatever dorm room confessional is the end all of their personality.
Yeah, totally. No, it's that what you said about hubris though is so true. I'm always that person, like always raise your chance. You feel in danger? Yes, right here, Anders, I feel in danger because you don't raise your hand unless you have the immunity necklace around you. Like it's just always the right play. It's always the right play unless you look stupid.
So when you came into the merge, like at what did you have defined goals? Like, okay, here are the people I want to end with, or here's what I want to do. Like, how did you change your game or really pivot come merge? I know you talked about a little bit. You talked about this a bit at your final tribal council, but maybe you can go back through that another time.
Yeah, I mean, post-merge strategy is really hard. And that's where I think knowing Survivor and how it's played out really helps. Because I didn't know, right? Like when you watch Survivor and you've seen a few seasons, you get an idea of like, okay, after the merge, that's heavily weighted. That's heavily weighted towards your resume. So right now you want to start building your case. And I had a sense of that, but not to the extent of like what I would say like Doug or other people might have had of like this awareness that this is really, really critical of thinking, strategizing who do I want to bring to the end, who can I beat. All those sorts of questions weren't necessarily coming across my mind immediately until other people started bringing it up in conversations. I was like, okay, yeah, I need to give this thought. What I did have an awareness of was where am I positioned in this game, and how can I make sure that I last to the end? That's a lot of the strategy that was going on in my mind. I had this game hunch where I was like, I've been playing really strong, really out there. People know my name. People know that I have these connections. I built up a really
you just blindsided the hell out of Jasmine. Like I think
exactly, and
right,
Liam. I mean, people didn't know that probably, but they knew like, oh, like people probably knew I wanted Liam gone because I had mentioned it before too.
And I think
so it was just
two together with Morgan. I think someone like Morgan and Angie would, you got to assume that they're going to say right from the start, like Santi got Jasmine out and he probably got Liam out too. Like I always thought that coming into the merge, you were someone who had this enormous target, and you did a very good job of sort of being like, oh, me? No. Start thinking of somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where I think I did a really good job of is I knew where my threat level was, how big my target, the target on my back was, and so I was like, I got to manage this a little bit. From the season I watched the Survivor, having a big target around your back and that just staying there, you can only do so much to survive. You can only win so many challenges. You can only find so many idols, right? And I was just like, I need to figure this out. And so my strategy early on was like, all right, like let's make this as much about easy votes as we can. Let me lean on these relationships that I've built on this time. I don't need to have all the attention. I don't need to have all the, after you make a vote, like all the reputation of like, wow, they made this move. In my mind, I was like, I've done enough for now. Let me slow this down a little bit, and then I'll pick it back up later. So that was like, I was just like, I really need to manage this threat level so that I can last longer.
Right.
I think the other thing too, something I remember really being on my mind is like, what are these relationships with people that weren't on my tribe going to look like? Because all of a sudden, I'm sitting there and, Mike got voted out, and then basically all the alliances that I had in Chickasha, even Angie, were kind of shaky. Like Josh, like I thought I could just count on Josh throughout the whole game. I'm like, oh, I don't know if this is. Like it sounds like he's starting to realize like there's a move to be made here, and so I was like, what other connections do I need to make so that I can ensure my safety? But the thing is that a lot of the other people playing the game were locked into other relationships, or they weren't really playing the game, and so it wasn't this like very serious like. Without naming names, it wasn't this like serious like
Okay, so I want to talk about this a little because like
you don't have to diss her more now that she's
well, no, I just want to say I felt watching it, Delaram and Abby as this block, it felt like they really constrained the strategy and the actions players could take. Did you feel that way? Saying like knowing what Delaram and Abby, where they were and what they were doing, what they wouldn't do, it felt like you had to play around that, and that felt like you were limited in what you could do. Is that crazy for you to say?
I think that's very fair. Obviously, Delaram turned it around at the end, though.
Oh yeah, Delaram was fire in the last 2 episodes, but until that point, the way she and Abby worked was interesting.
Until that point, it felt like there was just they were doing Survivor for fun, but there was just this difference in people that were putting a lot of work into meeting and like thinking through their strategy, and then Delaram and Abby were just pretty consistent, like friendships, let's have fun, this is just the vibe. So it's like, okay, like they're doing their own little thing with this. The cool for them. That's their energy. But as far as like the strategic element, it only went so deep. At least that was my impression. But I also could have done my part in making more of an effort because I didn't really work with that. I think it was that with Abby. I was like, I didn't see her as somebody. I was like, I really want to ally with her because I felt like I would have to do a lot more of the work with limited benefit to me. Whereas like these other people, it's like it would be more of this partnership of like, okay, let's talk to them. We can work at this together. But yeah, I think that's fair.
How much does this play into your decision of the final 9? The final 9, you have this proposed alliance. It would be Sadie, Abby, Delaram, you and Doug, and Josh is also voting with them. And then you have this opposing alliance of Dane, Angie, and I'm missing a person.
Amanda? No.
No, Amanda just went out. Yeah, Tim. So you have Dane, Angie, and Tim, and you and Doug are kind of being torn. Like, which way do you want to go? How do you want to vote? And you end up siding with Tim, Dane, and Angie. But like, what led you to make that choice versus maybe going with the Sadie alliance, which you had some players that maybe weren't as active in it?
Yeah, I remember that's the episode where Doug really wanted to go with Delaram and Sadie and Abby, and I was like, I'm not comfortable with that. Yeah, I just think I didn't. When we met with Delaram and Abby and like had this conversation, it was like, oh yeah, roommate alliance, like let's do it. We can run this. It just sometimes it's just as simple as you're in a conversation and the vibe's not right. There's just this not like I don't have a good feeling about me being able to work with them long term. I maybe I value that too much, you could argue, but I just didn't feel it. I felt like they had other priorities. It might have been just the fact that they weren't playing the game at the same level, but my impression was like, no, I'd rather I see more potential with Josh, Tim, and Angie still. So yeah,
it also felt dangerous. Like you'd be going to a final 5 potentially with a trio.
Right, exactly. And
granted,
you know, oh, good.
Oh, you don't know Doug has 3 idols, and so you could tell you were totally fine if that was the situation, right? But like it's a bit of a scary prospect.
You're saying It felt dangerous? Thank you so much, everybody. I had to.
We'll put comedian as your not Naomi. We got Naomi the comedian.
Oh yeah, look, I may or may not have had a stand-up comedy club in college, but I will not answer any more questions about it. Thank you so much.
Can I Google that? Naomi Calhoun.
No.
It's out there. Now you put it out there.
I think I made all those YouTube videos unlisted. Sorry. But
oh, wow, there they are.
No, stop, Steven. Well, I think that like this move is so pivotal, and I think you make the right move. And actually, something that Doug does that I thought was always intentional, but then I don't really know is he doesn't vote for Sadie, right? He basically is like, "Oh, I voted for Abby. What happened?" And like it doesn't work. Did you talk to him about that? And that sort of, in my opinion, when I watched it at the first time, I was like, "Oh, he threw his vote to not piss off Sadie, to look like he didn't know what was going on, whatever." But then he sort of talks about it, and then it seemed like he didn't know what was going on. And I don't know. Could you shine a little light for me on?
Yeah. I mean, Doug to this day Doug will tell you to this day that was a friendship decision. Doug and Sadie were really close, so I think that's where you start seeing the friendship threads start coming out of the season, where it's like, oh, I would not feel right. Doug really did not want to vote Sadie out. Like he was really like against that, and. Yeah, I think he just didn't, they had worked so close and Doug felt really bad betraying her, and didn't want to do that. So, I think he wanted to save face with Sadie because it worked out in 2 ways. One, his conscience would be clear, like, I'm not the one that voted you out. And 2, Doug probably wouldn't say this outright, but it's this element of like, oh, she's gonna be on the jury, so I can always leverage that later. It's like, it's always Doug, like, there's always that like very pure, like actual genuine, like I care about our friendship motive. But I think like in his analytical, like back of his mind, he's like, this could actually benefit me too. So that's at least how I understand it.
Well, and
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, Doug always finds himself in these 2 birds, 1 stone situation where it's like, yeah, I'll vote out Sadie. I won't vote for Sadie, and she'll vote for me in the end. But then also she'll go home, and I won't have to vote her out. Like it's always he always conveniently finds a way to lose his friends.
Well, I mean, this is such a pivotal moment, I think, in his game. Losing Sadie for him is losing such a shield and such an option for him in the end
Yeah.
game. It's great for you. Like this is like
Yep.
fantastic that you're able to pull it off for you and the rest of your alliance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's probably where Doug starts losing a little bit of power towards the end there. And I have to really credit Tim for that move too, because a lot of it was Tim really wanted Sadie gone. I don't think Tim pulls it off without me and making that decision, obviously, but Tim really, really was in the forefront saying like we need to make this move because it helps. Doug and Sadie are both really big threats, and it forces Doug to then want to work with me and Tim more than having this other huge alliance option. So the more you eliminate somebody's option, the more likely that they're going to want to stick with you. So it was a really good game move. And it was awkward seeing Sadie at intramural flag football after, but didn't stop us from winning the championship. So we're good. We're all good. All is resolved.
The crown was worth it.
Do you think Doug would have given Sadie a media idol if it like at that final 8 tribal council? Do you think that's an option he would have ever considered doing?
Sure, he considered it. I think Doug knew that would be such a attention grab, or like everybody would then see that as like, oh my gosh, what a move. Doug's threat level would have instantly blown up.
He just could have given to her behind everyone's back, so she just plays it.
That's fair.
He had
That's
an extra
fair.
one, man. No one even knows him.
I mean, and to be fair though, Sadie is not known for keeping secrets, and like texting people about Idol. So I don't know how much confidence Doug had in Sadie keeping that secret down. I will say, just as a side note, Sadie, one of the best flag football players I've ever seen in my life. I mean, oh my gosh, are we glad? Like, am I glad she was on our team? Literally, she like I still to this day remember I was through the pass to her. Sadie's running. There's these 2 guys coming to pull her flag. Does this nasty juke move. They run into each other. Both end up on the ground. 70-yard touchdown. I just felt like I had to say. I mean, Sadie, legit one of the best athletes that ever stepped foot on Maryland. So yeah, I just had to say that because I love the story. But
she was my winner pick, and I think in my head I was like, an intramural athlete is somebody who like works with a lot of people, has a lot of heart and grit. Like, I want this person. I think she's got it.
So intimidated by Sadie early on. I was like, oh my gosh, this girl is so like with it, athletic, everything. I'm like, geez, that's something to deal with later.
Would you prefer going up against Teresa in soccer or Sadie in flag football?
Jeez, this is harder than the friendship dilemma at the end. So both lead to embarrassing outcomes.
Right.
I'm better at flag football. I'll take my chances at flag football. But Sadie is overall a better athlete than I think Teresa. I mean, Sadie legit has like 20 championships throughout. Like I think if there's a record to be had in women's intramurals in Maryland, she has like all of them.
Something else I wanted to talk about, besides your lack of athletic prowess compared to the women on this season, is possibly is your relationship with Dane, because we have this move with Tim, obviously, and I just was wondering, like, if you had any real connection with Dane throughout the season, because he's really seemed to be kind of like everybody's little brother who's hanging around and keeps getting voted for. And I didn't know if you had a relationship with him outside of the connections he has with Tim and Doug.
Yeah, I did. There were moments of connection with Tim or with Dane. I remember him. I remember giving him a ride home, and having a meaningful conversation then. But Dane was always a little bit mysterious, and I think that comes across in the edit as well. And so there's this like mystery to Dane where I'm like, I don't feel like I fully understand you. Like even the moves you make, I'm like, I guess that makes sense, but I don't get it. So there was this mystery element with Dane that I think kept me from fully connecting with him, on top of the fact that he had been, in relationships with all these people before. So there was a point where I was like, I'll take Dane far. I think this can work. And I thought I could beat him, but there was just like these, you see it at, for example, I loved watching the pole challenge back, because I ended up leaving super early after I fell off. I had like a poker night with this like Maryland basketball player. I was like, oh my gosh, this is my time to like meet somebody on athletics. You know, again, Survivor and Maryland and athletics, best friends. So I was like, I'm not missing that. Sorry. But then you see Dane like just so into it and like, this is my chance to emerge. And you felt it a little bit, like he really wanted to come out of his shell and make a big move. And when you think big moves of like big move quote, like the entire merge, that's code for me or Doug. Like what other, you know, maybe say what other big moves? I'm sorry. Like what else is there? What other big moves? People are always like that. That's one of the criticisms I don't get maybe about my game. And you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it's like, what big move did you make? All right, well, what big moves were there left to be made after Jasmine, Liam, Sadie all go home? Like, who do you want out? Like, are you really going to be impressed by a Dane blindside? Like, I don't really think so. So, you know, Angie was a tough one. So maybe like voting, but even Angie didn't have a lot of power. So like, is that a big move? I don't know. And I'm not somebody that thinks I played a perfect game towards the end, but it's this idea of like a big move at the end. The big moves left were me and Doug at the end of the day. And so maybe part of it is a frustration. I was like, you should have gotten Doug out. Can totally understand that. But outside of that, I feel like there just wasn't there on the table to be had.
Well, I think I think you can maybe say you play a defensive game, right? Like when you're on the kind of the top, if you are the big move, your goal is just not to be the move, and so you have to just play against it the entire time. And your end game is I just get there at the end, and boom, that's it. That speaks for itself.
That's exactly it. And I told Anders this, you know, because Anders, and I think this shows a little bit in the edit, he was so frustrated. He was so frustrated by the fact that people weren't turning on Doug, and he would ask me like, why would like during confessionals, so like what move are you gonna make? Well, I'm like, I'm happy with keeping the status quo right now because the status quo has me at the top or second. Like, you know, I'm right here. Like, I feel like I'm 1 or 2 in this game right now. So why would I want to shake up the order of things when I feel like the order of things is me coming out on top? So yeah. I think that was exactly my mindset is like, how can we, if anything, what moves can I make to de-incentivize people to want to shake things up? Who are the people that want to shake things up? Let's get them gone, because shaking things up means either me or Doug is going home, and that's not what I want right
now. A question I kind of had is, did you think at any point, because I think that is a complete, there's a player on Survivor New York this season that we just had air, who she's like, my strategy is never to be the underdog. It is always to be on the top and pick off everybody who's trying to threaten me. And I think it's a valid strategy. It's just like people don't like to watch it because whatever, human nature. And
underdogs.
Right. And so the other side of this is, in your mind, were you thinking that Doug was becoming essentially, after the Sadie vote, a little more unlikable and your chances of beating him were becoming higher and higher? I say that fully from a game standpoint and not from like a personal standpoint. Like, I think Doug was making moves that were making him a little less beloved by the jury. And I don't know if that was anything that you were thinking about as you took him further and further.
Yeah. So towards the end, I would say right about after the Sadie vote was when I started catching on. I was like, okay, let's think about end game strategy here. And what I had limited information, right? Like I already mentioned the fact that I didn't know the extent of what Doug did pregame. So that's like, you know, I underestimated that. And 2, I didn't know about all the idols. So I was like, why would, you know, like I'm sitting there thinking I have just as good of a chance of beating Doug at the end at that point.
Right.
And I fully thought that I could persuade the jury. I thought like I can out public speak Doug at this tribal. I can fully prepare my arguments. And so I feel good about that. And so I felt like, yeah, I have the likability factor, and I think I can win. I have a shot. So I wasn't like I have no chance of winning. Then like the season kind of starts taking all these turns, and more information comes out about Doug, about the perception. So that's when I start reassessing. I'm like, oh shoot! But even then, like Doug was playing a game that was gonna get like once his threat level starts emerging, it's like people are gonna want him gone at the end anyway. So am I the one that needs to make that move in the position that I'm at, or is that in a way, if his threat level and people think like maybe he's now the runner up to win this game, maybe that's a good shield for me, because if he's gone, then guess who then the next person is that people are going to want gone. So all those things were crossing in my mind. So, right or not, at least that's the perception of like who really is at the top. How if I'm neither, how can I keep things going? But I get it. It's you want underdogs to shake things up. You don't want people controlling the season. I think the best comparison, and I did watch the season, was Dom and Wendell.
Yeah.
I think that's
really
probably
what every
Yeah, we had a lot of good Valley comparisons.
and they did, but and people like what's funny is I love that season because I could relate to it completely. I'm like, these guys are doing exactly what they need to do in their spot. And for me, that's fun to watch. But I get it. Like, people don't necessarily like that because we love underdogs.
Well, and also the part of the place to blame for the first season like goes down is like the people who couldn't get outside of their own self to consider that the two people they liked the most were also the people that would beat them in the end. Like someone like Kellen or Laurel. And obviously they get a lot of hate for it, which is like, it's a game. Let's all chill out. But I think it's the same thing where I think people were really upset with like Delaram and Abby and then maybe Josh. Like people had this sort of, and Tim, I think in particular, really hits this Laurel spot of like, people are so angry at them that they're not doing anything. And sure, it's on them, but like, what are you gonna do? It's a fucking game. But like, chill out.
Yeah, and I think part of what makes it part of a successful strategy when you're on the top is helping people to feel like they're there too.
Mm-hmm.
Because then there's less sense of, if you feel like you're in the runner up, but in reality, that's not the truth, then you don't feel this need to like, I need to make a move. And I think that's the position where especially Josh and Tim found themselves in, is I think I'm right there. But the perception at least wasn't there of that being the case. And so that's probably, I think, where me and Doug did probably, I would credit him for doing a better job of really putting this blinder on people about their status in the game. But I also did my role in that. And so that's when I look at Dom and Wendell, that's part of it. And you get mad at the people in that middle tier spot, but there's also credit to be given to the people that are helping that to make that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, and you played things correctly at the Final Four. It's like, Doug is my shield. If he doesn't win, I vote him out because he'll win. And that assures me in the final three. And I think you were probably, I don't know, depending on jury sentiment with Delaram, you were probably sitting the prettiest of the final three at that point anyways.
Yeah. I mean, there was a fear that, like, again, I knew at that point it had become clear to me that I was not the favorite to win over Doug. And so I was like, okay, let's vote Doug out. I had been won over by that. And I was like, that was my mindset. Obviously, it did not go that direction. There was this legitimate argument to be had, though, about Delaram. People, again, I think people love the underdog story. So there was this fear, it's like, like people love the Delaram speeches and whatever, and like love that she stood up to me and Doug and all these things. So there was this like, if I make it to the finals and I lose to Delaram, who has only been playing for 3 weeks, that was so bad. I honestly don't think she would have won because
I think she got some votes, but
I think she would have gotten some votes. I think Delaram would have really struggled convincing people of her game. You know, like maybe the Angies and the Joshes, like the people that voted for me, I think still would have wanted to vote for me. And even maybe the swing votes who would have decided that would have been like Amanda and Dane, which were the swing votes for the Doug vote. So I still like my odds there, but that would have, if I made it to the finals, voted out Doug, and then lose to Delaram, I love Delaram. I'd be so upset still, though.
So I have another hypothetical. So at the final five, we saw Doug musing about idling for Dane and taking Dane in the final four. And let's say that happens. Let's say Delaram gets idled out at final five because Doug says Dane. And we get the final four. Tim wins again. So it's Tim who's immune, Doug, and Dane. Who do you vote for?
I mean, from a pure strategic standpoint, I want Doug gone.
Okay, so you take Dane to the end.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it all depends. I think the same situation arises though with Doug. Is so like all these things get brought up from Doug's perspective about, oh my gosh, like I put all this investment into the game, it's not working out the way I want it to be. There's also these feelings that are emerging that I've never had before. How do I deal with those? So I don't know that anything changes as far as the friendship dilemma. But from a purely strategic standpoint, I think I would have absolutely wanted Doug gone. But that's no different than it was when Delaram was sitting there too.
Right. I wanted to circle back for one thing, which is you not playing the idol at 6.
Yeah.
How, like, just the absolute, like, balls to not play it at 6 was insane. And then it essentially really benefits you at 5, which is, like, you're so lucky. It's crazy. But why didn't you think about playing your idol at that point?
2 reasons: hubris and another form of hubris. So I think the first reason is I was just so confident. Like, the game had gotten, I'd been on the right side of every single vote, like how I assess things to go. Nothing surprised me up to that point in the game. There was no like vote reads that were like, oh, I didn't see that coming. And the fact that Delaram had been such a consistent player, I was like, oh, Delaram's going to have to switch. And she hasn't talked to Angie once in this game. What, is she going to start playing now? And she did, credit to her, but I didn't see that coming. But 2, there was this element of like, Doug gave me this idol. I play it. It's not mine. I have to credit him for that. And I didn't want to do that. I was thinking through like, oh, I would be so annoyed at the thought of like, sit in the scenario that I'm sitting at the final with Doug and he's like, oh, by the way, like, you used that idol and like I helped save you. I just didn't want to have, and I was like, if I sit through this, I think the odds are really low that I go home. Then I don't have, and I'd be like, I didn't need you. What did you do? Like, what did, like, you didn't even give me an idol. Not that of course you need each other, but you didn't directly have to, like, I didn't take anything from you to have to make.
Yeah, you would have gotten that, like, sarcastic Doug of like, oh, like the idol that I gave you, you played it. I love that Doug so much. Of like when Dane, just anytime he talks to like Dane, he's like, oh, but you like stayed on that pole really long. Like, did you think we were gonna let you out? It's my favorite. Doug.
It makes me sick. And Doug and I still talk a lot of smack. When that side of Doug comes, we're both like very annoyingly cocky to each other. And so that, I just could not deal with that. I could not deal with it.
Yeah, it was always like passive aggressive girlfriend Doug. Just like, oh, like you're gonna go out tonight? I thought we were gonna stay in, but okay, that's fine. Yeah, I loved it.
It's really fascinating to hear you describe this dilemma of like, if I play this idol for myself, I give Doug more power, because I've always thought about like the optics of having it someone else's idol. Because I always feel like if you play an idol for someone else, you're like, aha, they're in my power. And at the very end, you say, well, they're here because I want them to be here. I brought them here with me.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the optics of it. Whether or not it's true, it's all about perception. And I thought that's how people are going to see this, and I don't want to feed into that narrative.
Yeah, back to Ghost Island, you see like Wendell do the same thing with Laurel, where he puts the immunity on her neck, and it's like, yeah, Laurel like has no power at the end, and Wendell took a lot of that away from her.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So at the final 6, the votes are read. It's 3-3, Doug and Dane, and you're just like, oh my gosh.
Holy crap.
It revotes. It's a tie again. You're like, I'm going to go to the rocks. Was there any part of you it's like, time to cut my losses? I have an idol in my pocket. Let me just like
bye Dane. Bye Doug.
Bye Doug. Hello idol.
Yeah.
Like
you bet it.
Was there any that was that in your mind at all? You're like, nope, rocks all the way down.
Absolutely, it was crossing my mind. I was so frustrated though. I think that was the thing. That was just an emotional try. I remember I threw my hat. Because again, you like when you get so used to like things going your way the entire game, and then all of a sudden it doesn't go your way, you're like, what the heck is it? Like, what is this? I haven't felt this before, and so it was just like I was really upset at the situation, but I was like, wait a second, I haven't. So I was thinking about it, but I think it was just all overpowered by the fact that I felt angry at the situation of me not being like the votes not having gone the way I wanted to, and Doug, like somebody else getting the credit of Doug going home. Because if we're talking about big moves, like if Doug was gonna go home, I want it to be because I wasn't a part of it. As strange as like we already talked about the fact that like in the best case scenario, I'm actually not the one that has to do it from a friendship dilemma, but from a pure game situation, I wanted to have that in my in my resume as far as like the big, again, that was the big move to be made in the game, right? And if I wasn't a part of it, I would have had to deal with it. So there was just like all those things that you're like thinking out in the moment. But what took over was just this emotional, like, freak, Angie didn't tell me again. Can I trust any of these people going forward after they just did this again? Like,
Right.
that's just an annoying situation. I'm upset. I can still, like, the odds are still in my favor if I go to Rocks. And I was just really stubborn about it. So I can make a case either way from a strategy perspective. What was the best move? Because I've played this out, right? Let's say Doug goes, I have the idol, save myself. Who do I want to then bring in with me to that final four? I don't know that there's anybody that then is like, because I would be presumably be controlling that. I won that final five challenge. So let's assume that I win that final five challenge, have immunity through that, and have the idol. I'm controlling. Could go that direction. Could do something else. I control that final five. Then at final four, is anybody really going to want to take me if I don't win the challenge? Then I have a 1-4 shot versus a 1,
Right.
So it just depends on like how all that plays out.
Yeah.
So,
it's not a great position because it is like you talk about it in the beginning of the finale is like Angie blindsided the shit out of me. Like I didn't expect that. I didn't expect them to be talking. And as much as Angie could say, well, we literally, and I think she told us this, they literally like talked that day and were like, okay, let's vote out Doug. And that's insane. Yeah. But that's such a like a crazy alliance that is unpredictable. And unpredictability is a fear of like, whoa, if they're going to vote out Doug after like 2 hours of talking, what the hell else are they going to do? I think it's like a big sort of scary element to it.
Yeah, it's like this loss of control, and you're like, what do I got to do to get this sense of control back? What gives me the best chance of that? And, Rocks is not where you don't have any control over Rocks in a sense of luck, but there was this confidence of like, it's 1 out of 3 that I go home. That's still pretty low odds. And so I did that calculation. I was like, I think that's fine. But I'm just confident that in the moment in that way. I'm manifesting like I'm not going home with Rocks.
I think the next thing to talk about is maybe some more of the Final Four. I feel like you probably are exhausted on this topic. You've talked about it enough as is, but is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Just how that happened or went down that you feel like hasn't come out already?
I feel like it's all been said. I mean, I'm happy. I don't mind talking. Is there anything like specifically that you guys are like, I still have this question about Final Four, like what went down? Why were you feeling this way? What was Doug feeling this way? Any of it? Like, because I feel like I've said my piece. I don't have anything that's like, hot take, this angle hasn't really been said about the Final Four. Here's what changed everything. But maybe there's something that's not clear in your guys' mind.
I think, first of all, I have to say, when I watched the sort of recap with Anders, I thought your point about boundaries was really interesting and also very necessary. I think like the emotional people like love the drama, love the roommates, the friends going after each other, but like the boundaries and emotionally be like, we know that mental health is important in college. And so I think this is a very pertinent thing is like, let's set boundaries. Let's, don't play with your roommate unless you can set a boundary of like what's cool and what's not cool and what's game and what's not game.
Exactly. And, or just say like, I think what I wish it can be as simple as this. And me and Doug, do this later is, okay, we're playing this game. Like in the game, I can absolutely lie, betray, do whatever thing is necessary. And you can trust me to the extent that you want to trust me in the game, but that's fully within either of our rights to do that. And it has no bearing on our friendship. And as long as you have those boundaries and that's not then threatening friendship or making comments out of like, hey, yeah, this is going to affect us beyond the game. That's all out of bounds. You establish that from the jump, then you avoid some like really, really, messy situations later. So I think it's just simple as like, people talk about like DTR defining the relationship when you like somebody, you're like, is this a friendship? Is this, are we feeling each other? What is this? Something along those lines with like Survivor's like, all right, this is game. Still love you outside the game, but I'm well within my rights to vote you out because that's how this is played and that's how we're choosing to play this. And that's all that needed. It's unfortunate that we weren't mature enough to go about that beforehand, but I hope that people in the real Survivor or wherever like learn that lesson and are able to do that.
Yeah.
At what point do you wish you had that conversation with Doug? Would it be like when you first both apply, when you first start playing the game, when you end up on the same tribe during the merge? At what point do you feel like, oh, there was a time for that conversation? That's what it should have been.
I think any time before you start playing the game, anytime before day one. So like whenever you both get accepted and choose to do it, anytime between that when that happens and when you all show up day one for the first challenge, just to clarify, like, okay, we're going into this game where the whole premise is how much can you trust people, how much influence can you get and get to the end while backstabbing and doing whatever is necessary in the way to get there, knowing full well that all those things could cost you in your ability to win. So the whole premise of the whole structure of the game, I should say, incentivizes you betraying people at one point or another. So you have to talk about that stuff, and it's hard because you don't that going in, and so you're like, oh, of course that's part of the game. That's not going to be an issue. But until you play it, and that's where it's like people commenting online maybe don't get it to an extent, is when you play it, it's different. It's just different. You're spending so much time together. You're building genuine friendships. You are making memories. These bonds are real. And as much as like on paper, it's a game, the lines get really blurry if those boundaries aren't there. And that's what's hard. And that's what I didn't get going in. But it was a lesson learned. And every other time I played, I knew that from the jump, and it made it much easier.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, I think also there's a big difference between the $1 million that's in Real Survivor and this game.
Right. Yeah, like, oh my, yeah, $100. Yeah, exactly. But it makes it, with the $1 million, in some ways that makes it easier. In other ways, it's like, it makes it so much more intense because when you get betrayed, you're not just like mad about the friendship, but you're also mad about everything that you would have everything that you could have done with that $1 million. Right. So it's like, like you prevented me from paying for my mom's, whatever. Like you hear these crazy stories about what people were playing Survivor for. And so I've thought about applying for the Real Survivor. I think Doug has. Good night. Like, I don't think I could do it. I mean, that's just like that's really hard. I think it'd be so fun, but then like, again, you show up there and it's like some of these people talk about like mental health scars for like years after. You just don't, like, you got to heal. I don't, especially, people that play live reality games over and over and over again, sometimes really don't trust people outside of, like, in real life, they're like, I can't trust people anymore. Like everybody's out to betray me. I'm like, no, I don't want those scars. So we'll see, but that's at least where I stand right now.
I learned a fun, from some whatever Survivor thing I was at, Johnny Fairplay had said, like, the real thing casting wants to hear is like why you want to win $1 million. And I think that's always the core of the show, right? It's like $1 million could change your life. What are you gonna do to get there? And then we have, as fans, sort of taken it to say, well, we just like people fighting with each other, so let's just do that for like $100 and see how it goes. And I think it's even more sort of emotionally destructive in certain ways, like you've said. I think even online reality games, if you're in it to win it, to make yourself feel better about yourself, then you need to take a step back and reassess.
Yeah. Don't do it to make friends. There's many other ways that you can make friends that won't threaten. Like, you just gotta love strategy and reality, and like it's great for that. But and it's a great community. I've made great friendships through Survivor. But if that's your primary reason, there's way less scarring and ways like there's just better ways to do it, in my opinion.
So can you talk a little about, like, once the game wraps up, you win, Doug loses. I'm sure Doug is.
Oh, he was thrilled. He was nothing but happy.
Doug is all happy. Can you talk about like kind of the mending of your relationship with him and how was that process?
Outside of like the fact that I really wanted to win, obviously, and I'm very happy about that scenario, I think it was the best case scenario for our friendship as well. Because Doug was the one that in the end had apologized for a lot of the things that he did and said, that manipulation, intentional or not. And had he won, and let's say it was a unanimous vote, for as much as I would have forgiven him, it's just hard. There's a lot more to heal through that. About like the friendship and like kind of like at the end of the day, there's like that stain, and sometimes like you really do genuinely forgive somebody, but it like there's a hurt there that doesn't just go away, right? Whereas Doug losing it, like it was still hard for him for sure, but it wasn't this constant, memory of like I made it about friendship and won, like, and I think he would have even felt stained by it because he didn't want to win, and like I think had he won, he wouldn't have felt completely right about it either. And so I don't think it would have felt great for either of us, kind of sitting there and reflecting on the memory. And I know it's still hard for Doug, like watching the season as it is for like a lot of us, but that I think it worked out best case scenario for our friendship. So as far as the healing, I mean, it helped honestly watching it back and like talking about it. He didn't watch the season, or he watched some of the episodes, not all of them. But we would still talk and kind of like a couple of things. Like I was just like, can you clarify? Like, where was your head about this? Like, just curious. Obviously, it was all 4 years ago, so it ultimately doesn't have implications. But it's just good to like fully understand where everybody was coming from, communicate, talk whatever needs to be talked out. But it honestly, like after Doug apologized, wrote me that letter, it wasn't that bad after Final Tribal. We just kind of moved on with our lives, and like, yeah, the school was stressful enough, so there wasn't really a lot of thought of like let's keep talking about Survivor and like bringing these things up. So it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad.
Dr. Doug had other things to worry about.
That's right. Okay. That's right.
You at this point are now part of a Survivor elite. You're one of 7 people who've won Survivor Maryland, and your roommate is coming back for the next season. What advice did you give Doug?
What advice did I give Doug?
After all, you're a winner. You know what you're doing.
I'm a winner. Well, Doug has, whenever we mentioned this earlier, right? When you come back to play again, it's very different than you coming in with a clean slate. So I don't know that. Maybe Doug asked me for advice. I don't think he did. Doug's not the type to. Me and Doug have a very like funny relationship where we both really, really respect each other. But we don't admit that. Like we don't say it a lot because it's better. We're both really, again, we have this like cockiness with each other of like talk trash. Like I beat you. I always remind him that he hasn't won Survivor with me playing or whatever.
Good qualifier there.
And yeah. And it's just, I love saying that all the time. And Doug, on the other hand, doesn't credit me with a lot of things because I already like, he doesn't like, you don't need the ego boost about this. So I think for him coming up to me and asking me for advice, it's hard to picture, especially about Survivor. But maybe what I would have said is you gotta ally with the people that also have stains, that also have perceived threats, because now you're in that group, and the more that they get cut off, the more that you're just going to be a target. So looking at this cast, you got people like Katie on, you got, did Faith play that season? No, I think she does, right? Yeah, Faith in that season.
Faith was season 6, Katie's season 4.
Right, but Faith is in season 8. Yep.
So, you got Eric, you got Mike, you got Morgan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that Mike and Morgan have the threat level that Doug does coming into that, but you have people that others are going to want out, and so I would have told Doug, had he been humble enough to ask me for advice, that hey, you should work with big names.
Right.
Was it weird watching him play Survivor and you're not playing with them, like because like we saw so much of the season of you two in the room kind of debriefing and talking through, and suddenly it's now just him and not you?
Was it weird? I don't think it was weird. I enjoyed it. I was like getting to experience all the drama and me not having to go through the emotional stress of it. So it was a very like fun, like being, I think I was on crew that season, not super involved. I think it was a pretty busy semester for me. I was in crew in other seasons and really got into it, rooting for people. We have this draft. And so it's really fun being a spectator and seeing people. And actually, who did come to me for advice before that season? Katie on. Yeah, I was graced with another Survivor Elite, as Steven would say, coming and saying like, hey, like, what are your thoughts on this, and wrestling with friendship, and even some stuff with like spirituality and stuff like that. And so we talked for a while. So we'll see if my advice paid off. But
Did you tell her Doug's Achilles heel? You're like, this is exactly how you take him out.
I told her, don't trust Doug. Don't even play with him. Trash. don't not worth your time. Get him out day one. That's exactly what I told her.
Such a theme of like players from your season being close friends with former players and not asking for a scrap of advice. And I think it's funny that Doug is continuing on the tradition. Like Teresa and Holly, Josh and Micah. Delaram, who did Delaram say she was friends with? Wasn't that what we found?
Oh,
damn it! It was somebody like somebody.
She went to high school with Katie. She went to high school with Katie.
Okay, Katie and there's someone else that was like in a business. Maybe it was LeCompte. I'll have to watch our interview back. But she's close with somebody, and this is all to say that they never asked for like a shred of advice, and it didn't help them one bit.
Hubris. Call them out, Naomi. Always ask for advice.
Oh, so funny. I know. I love that. Like, Josh is like, I'm gonna prove Mucker wrong, and then it's like, are you gonna ask me anything? I do love Josh. One of my favorite Twitter followers.
It's so true. I mean, it's so fun even talking through game with people that have played before. Like me and Katie did, like we've caught up recently, and we were talking a lot about the season and how things were played out. So people that have played understand it from a different level, and so they can really like help and validate. Like, yeah, no, that's a tough spot, whatever. And so it's super, super valuable. All that's to shame Doug for not asking for advice, and Godspeed on season 8 though, Doug. You got this.
So when Doug wins, you take all the credit. You say, "I taught him everything he knows." If Doug loses, like you wash your hands, say it's his fault.
You didn't ask me for advice. Exactly. See, Steven gets it.
So looking back at this full Survivor season, what do you think you're like? What were the proudest moments for you? Like, what are your favorite highlights from it?
Oh, wow. Actually, all this time that I haven't been asked that. Favorite highlights. I mean, from a game, I know, right? Like, why has that not been a question? Okay, my favorite game moment where I was like, oh, that was just fantastic move. I felt so good about it was talking to Josh and then Liam going home. I was like, that is just like, if, that's like having a bounty hunter coming for you and then like having him taken out and your hands are clean of it. And you're like, now that stress is off my back. I don't have to deal with that anymore. So that one felt great from a game perspective, where, I wasn't even in that tribal, but I felt like I had a huge influence in the outcome. So that would be my favorite strategic moment. Challenge moment, I would say steal the bacon. Day one, it's my favorite challenge. Love it, just so fun.
You didn't feel the wrath of the cleats, so
I didn't feel. That's probably that everybody else that cleated probably
had Liam on his starting tribe.
That's right. That was all my doing. I made sure no cleats against me. So that's my favorite challenge moment. And then
even more than winning Final Five.
It's so funny. You know what? That was my favorite like challenge that I had the most fun playing. But from a game perspective, like that was the most like that's a huge win for me. Mm-hmm. So for sure, most frustrating, that stupid counting challenge. I hated that challenge. Anders edited this out, but he counted one of the things wrong, and so that's why nobody solved it. It was so stupid. I solved the first lock, and then once he corrected the second number, I knew the second one. I was the first one down and just blanked on the first lock combination. I would have won that. Then Tim wouldn't have had immunity. So who knows? That's the whole rocks vote. So who knows what would have happened there. So those are some highlights for me. Definitely not final tribal. Let me tell you that. That's one of my least favorite moments until I win. Gosh, that sucked. I mean, it was dark. It was cold. Dark that it was dark outside and dark that it just didn't. You did not sit through that and felt like, oh my gosh, like what a light, fun game we're playing. Like, haha, it's a good time. You're like, oh, this is. Yeah. People are coming from and it was worse. It was worse than the edit makes it seem. Like people said some crazy stuff. But yeah, those would be some of the like most hardcore memories for me.
Okay. Do you have a favorite like personal, like I don't know, personal connection moment from the game, like a any like conversation or like meetup or I don't know, not playing flag football with Sadie. I assume that's the opposite.
Right. Oh, gosh. Yeah. I mean, I loved I had some I think what was a really fun dynamic was me, Josh, and Angie getting together. I don't know why, like that was early on. We would just have a lot of fun together. And then beating Mike at FIFA every time we played was so satisfying. Mike's that guy that talks a lot of trash. You just humble him out, and then he lies about beating you, and that's what happens in our friendship. He beat me once. It was so annoying, and then he like literally sent it to the whole group. Like, guess what, guys? I beat Santi, and people like, Mike. Nobody cares. Nobody even knows that we play FIFA. Why are you like? And even from a game perspective, why are you telling everybody we're that close? You're so stupid.
Why are you telling people we're hanging out, Mike?
Right, like you're so dumb. But that's who Mike is. So those were some fun. Yeah, those were some fun memories. I had some really good connections with people in that season. So I definitely miss it. But I guess I have some other more recent Survivor memories that have yet to be told. So we'll see about those.
I'm excited.
So that's a teaser. I mean, one of our ending questions we like to ask is like, would you play one of these again? Considering you've played two different online games, Survivor Maryland, would you play a live Maryland game again, or would you play a non-Maryland live game again? Like Naomi helps run Survivor New York. Would you do like a 3 or 4 day game?
It's absolutely barring like the only thing is time. Like now, like for me, I'm just like, gosh, how do you find time? Quarantine was awesome because then it was just like, oh yeah, great, let's do it. Like throwback, like the whole 24 hours. Like I got nothing better to do. But now it's like grad school and God forbid adulting to this extreme, and like I'm just like, how in the world am I going to have time to do this again? But if it did come about, I would think about it for sure.
Mm-hmm. If the timing was right, yeah, I think that would be. I think the way that Maryland is so emotional, live reality games can be, but they also you get to meet so many different new people, and then usually they're pretty good at letting the emotions slide. It's the long-term friends that get mad at each other, so you don't have to worry about that too much.
Totally.
And the tragedy is like the way it's Maryland, right? So people will graduate, and so returning seasons are always kind of staggering that way. We'll never have a winners at war with you.
I know, it's terrible.
I know how many would they have to do?
Yeah, I mean, Angie, it would have been so good to watch Angie play again too. I mean, she's somebody that's like, like would have been awesome to have her, but she graduated. Yeah, no, it's tough.
Yeah, I think that's why we were so excited to see like Mike and Morgan back. We're like, oh my God, like they just got them. Like, thank God,
Yeah. Right shout out to Morgan. She was awesome. I didn't play with her that much. Like we just weren't that close. So I was just like, honestly, she was in the Abby Delaram category for me. But boy, was I wrong. Like she was doing things and it was impressive. But yeah, I'm excited to watch her. I don't know that much about how she played season 8. So now having seen season 7, I'm really curious how she goes about it.
Yeah. We're also dying to know, I think. And everybody, if you're watching this, just let's all ask Anders when season 8's coming out. Let's just bother him.
Favorite question.
Yeah, let's ask.
Pester him. I think he actually prefers that you do like those routine emails every week. Just like keep nudging him.
Just automate it.
Just automate it. I think the more like he loves it. He tells me enough. People don't ask me enough about when it's gonna come out.
Just tweet him every week. It's like X days since the last Maryland episode. Where is it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Oh gosh, and I mean Anders did an excellent job editing this season. So at least all the time that he spent editing was worth it. Because man, did he take a long time. But I guess when you're a perfectionist, you gotta do what you gotta do. Yep, worth it.
Awesome. Well, Steven, if there's nothing else, I feel like after an hour and a half, which I did not anticipate, we've done it. We've dove deep. I'm not good at words. Santi, thank you so much for being here with us. A real treat.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I was like, oh yeah, we'll talk for like 30 minutes. It'll be good. And I'm like, this is fun. You just lose track of time. No, this is great. Thank you guys for having me on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if there's anything we want, it's like a positive conversation about Survivor Maryland, major conflict, because it was a fun season. People are giving you a lot of credit as a winner. You're not the bottom of the list. Don't worry. I've seen the rankings on Discord, and you're not the bottom, so it's okay.
There we go. That's good. That's great to hear. That's great to hear.
Very uplifting, Naomi.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's all good. I'm securing it. You're not, my amount of shade isn't gonna get to me. And
You
no,
won.
You want
You got
nobody else
$100, and you can take Jasmine on a date, and not Doug. That's all that matters.
who's to say it didn't already happen, Steven? But don't tell
you needed
Doug.
to wait
Don't tell Doug.
to get the $100.
Right.
What's the deal?
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, guys.
Thank you for tuning into Live Reality Games. You can subscribe to us on YouTube and Facebook and all that other stuff. We have a Twitter now. I think it's at Live Reality Game. No S. One game. What live reality game is it? Who knows? And yeah, thank you, Santi, again. Thank you for Anders for all your help for this whole season. And Steven and I might have a recap finale podcast coming eventually if we get our shit together. But who knows? All right. I'm going to end this broadcast.